Pillow Book Back to Chaos in a Dream. Also known as Pillow Book Extra. By Tangqi Gongzi. English translations from eladzumpai.wixsite.com. Home blog categories. Back to Chaos in a Dream. Chapter 8. 3 years ago, the demon race split into 7 clans after ancestor demon goddess Shaowan faded. The 7 demon lords under the divine seat of Shaowan each led a branch of their clansmen, living in their separate territories within the southern realm, and governing their clans in their own ways. Henceforth, the demon race entered the era of the 7 coexisting demon lords lasting 260,000 years. Without Shaowan's restraint, the 7 demon lords were erratic and restless. When Fu Ying started the uprising, tossing heaven and earth into upheaval once again, they wanted to step into the foray to throw the situation into further disarray. But alas, the 7 lords were in the midst of fighting over territories and demarcating boundaries at that time, so they lacked the strength despite having the will to do so. Hence, they had to let that intention go. Towards the later part of the rebellion, the 7 demon lords were almost done dealing with their internal affairs and were eagerly gearing up to void the pledge of Zhongwei and enter the war. But who knew that Di Jun would fight the war at lightning speed? The gods had already declared an end to the war at the banks of the Ji Shui River. Besides, when the total scores were settled after the war, Di Jun gave them a lesson that would leave a considerably deep impression. High God Fu Ying and his supporters responsible for the uprising were all killed, leaving no one behind. Amongst the ghost and monster races, any clan who participated or supported the rebellion were all settled one by one. It had only been 7 days, but the blood of the rebels and dissidents had dyed the entire land of the Western realms in red. This cruel and hardline method greatly intimidated the demon race. The restless 7 lords had no choice but to retract their devious intentions, and they did not dare to make any rash decisions ever again. It was said that the original pledge of Zhongwei had already been ripped up by the impetuous Grey Demon Lord. After he witnessed Di Jun's iron-blooded methods, the Grey Demon Lord quietly and carefully glued the torn pledge of Zhongwei back together page by page, and returned it respectfully to its rightful place once again. In any event, the 8 realms finally returned to the tranquility and peace at the time of Mu Yuan's investiture of the gods 3 years ago. The god race was unified, and the world in allegiance to the gods. However, everyone did not anticipate that while the demon and monster races had stopped their machinations, trouble brewed in the internal affairs of the god race again. In the month following the war at Ji Shui River, an immortal lord submitted an official article of impeachment motioning to impeach the king of gods to the elders. The impeachment article flowed eloquently. Despite affirming that Di Jun had great merit in suppressing Fu Ying, it also reproved him for his excessively ruthless methods. The document stated that Fu Ying was guilty of starting a rebellion and deserved to be put to death. However, the ghost and monster lords had both been deluded by Fu Ying. While they had assisted him in the uprising, they were nevertheless sincerely repentant and had handed over their surrender documents. Yet Di Jun did not show the slightest bit of mercy, and still killed the 2 lords, an act that was unconscionably cruel. The western and northern realms were littered with millions of fallen bodies, their blood flowing like rivers, a sea of blood amidst a mountain of dead corpses, exposing the lack of benevolence in Di Jun's heart to the greatest extent. If he were to become the king of gods, how could he not be benevolent? As such, it was hoped that Di Jun would give up the position of king of gods on his own accord, allowing the god race to choose a more compassionate king, thereby winning the people of the world over with his virtue. The elders accepted the article of impeachment and had a private legislative assembly. They voted on a 17-3 poll count in favor of the affirmative, and approved the impeachment of Dijun. The gods beneath them were ignorant, but all the respectable gods in higher positions were able to see the truth behind this matter. It was just a show self-directed and performed by High God Hozhen and the elders. Fu Ying's rebellion and the crisis it presented were now eradicated, so the elders no longer needed Dijun and were anxious to rescind his authority, taking back their power. With Dijun's power and prestige in the 8 realms, one can imagine that if he were to remain the king of gods, the elders would definitely lose their authority to speak regarding the future matters of the god race. It was said that Dijun was impeached because he was not benevolent, and that they wanted to appoint a more compassionate king to win the submission of the world by virtue. These were all merely excuses. Everyone assumed that Dijun would be furious. After all, this matter was handled in a way that was akin to abandoning one's benefactor upon achieving one's goal. Superscript 2. The elders were very afraid, but they still took the gamble at giving it a go. Although Dijun had always been of formidable martial strength, he was a proud and aloof person, and never had the drive to fight for the conquest of heaven and earth. Hence, he did not store up on military strength and had just over 20 faithful and devoted god generals and a few 100,000 soldiers under his name when he was assisting Mu Yuan in his quest to unite the 8 realms. Dijun lived in seclusion afterwards. His god generals were demobilized, and they returned to their native homes. No one had ever heard of any additional private soldiers remaining at the heavenly Jade Sea. This time, Dijun had left seclusion to help the elders defeat Fu Ying, and the soldiers he led were the army of the god race. The army of the god race were the combined forces of Mu Yuan, Hozhen, and the elders. Dijun utilized the Chuan Yuan greater formation and trained the army of the god race in the process, thus they became the unrivaled iron force of the entire world. However, this iron army did not belong to Dijun, but to the elders of the god race. The elders were very meticulous in their consideration, so they weren't too afraid that Dijun would follow the example of Fu Ying and meet them on the battlefield to fight for the position of king of gods. But they feared that Dijun would fly into a rage in Ling Xiao Palace Hall and slaughter them all along with their entire clan. Hence, after their impeachment vote, the 17 elders reportedly fell ill one after another, quietly hiding in their official mansions. They even made sufficient fortifications to their homes, afraid that Dijun would show up at their doorsteps to settle his scores with them. The elders did not attend court at Ling Xiao Palace Hall for several consecutive days, and unexpectedly, neither did Dijun. 5 days passed before everyone felt that something was amiss, and began seeking high and low for him only to discover that the entire 13th floor of 9 heavens was closed. In the end, it was the guardian of the Parijata tree, the immortal lord of sacred trees, who came to Ling Xiao Palace bearing a message from Dijun. The immortal lord of sacred trees wore an ambiguous smile. Dijun said, "Everyone should just carry on vying for power, and not bother with whatever impeachment process. Making everything so fresh and comfortable must have been hard on all of you. He has no patience dealing with everyone, and has returned to the heavenly Jade Sea." Oh yes, he also said, if the heavens fall and the earth rends superscript 1 in the future, please do not ever come to the heavenly Jade Sea to bother him again. The clique of elders were embarrassed, and when that feeling passed, they got angry, several of the senior elders were so angry that they almost passed out. But they were helpless in this situation. Firstly, they were too afraid to direct their anger at Dijun, and secondly, they did not dare vent their anger on the immortal lord of sacred trees they had personally handpicked, and could only let it go. While the immortals and gods of the 9 heavens were turning heaven and earth upside down in their search for Dijun, a well-informed high god Zhayan kept watch outside the entrance of the heavenly Jade Sea. As expected, he waited successfully for Dijun. High god Zhayan went forward to stop him, and got straight to the point towards Dijun. You conceded defeat just like that. Defeat? Dijun answered him as he opened the door. You must be joking. This word does not exist in my dictionary. High god Zhayan thought that Dijun was just reluctant to admit defeat, and followed him on his own. That group of old men were blinded by greed. When have they truly cared about the god race and the 8 realms? They just felt that if you remained as the king of gods, it would just cause them inconvenience in their quest to consolidate their power, that's all. Speaking with hate, those cunning old men coaxed you into using the Qianyuan formation, training their soldiers into an unrivaled army for them in the process. In the end, they used this army as a card against you. But they were also very impatient. It's only been a month and they have wrested your power away. Isn't that too distasteful? Yes, Dijun opened the door and walked straight in. They certainly did not dare to be too hasty, so I gave them a hand. As if he was just asking in passing, you have also read the official article of impeachment written by immortal Lord Duoyi against me, right? It was pretty well written, wasn't it? High god Zhayan knitted his brows tightly. At a time like this, you can still say. He suddenly reacted to what Dijun had implied and could not believe it. That can't be. Dijun was indifferent. I offered Duoyi some ideas. High god Zhayan was in a shocked daze. So it was you who wrote it. Dijun was unwilling to take credit for the accomplishment of others. The choice of prose was still decided by Duoyi. High god Zhayan felt breathless. Why would you? Dijun was composed. Don't you think the current situation is very good? Who is standing in whose team is now obvious at a glance. High god Zhayan's state of mind revolved like an electric current, and he understood everything in an instant. After everything became clear to him, High god Zhayan felt that the many days he had spent worrying about this matter had been fed to the dogs. At this moment, the two of them were standing by the edge of the lake at the heavenly Jade Sea. Dijun summoned a cloud boat, and looked at High god Zhayan. It's getting dark. Are you sure you want to be a guest at the stone palace? Then he replied on High god Zhayan's behalf, no. Maybe not. Fei Wei needs to take care of our family of 3, so he has no time to entertain you. Fei Wei was speechless. High god Zhayan had no idea what he should say for a while. He only questioned himself on why he followed Dijun when he should have known better. As he watched Dijun getting onto the cloud boat alone without feeling any guilt, he thought about it, and finally became so angry that he rushed at Dijun's back view shouting, "A family of 3! Is having a family of 3 so amazing? Hey!" After he was done shouting, he calmed down and gave it some thought and felt that it was indeed quite an extraordinary feat. He sighed, feeling a little sorry for himself as he turned around to return home alone. The day before Dijun was due to arrive home, Fengzhu heard from Fei Wei about the great event in the 9 heavens that could change everything, like the fluctuating sun and moon. but the history books plainly state that Dijun was appointed to act as the temporary king of gods in the face of danger, and after the Battle of Ji Shui, voluntarily gave up the position as he had no intention of governing the 8 realms, and returned to the heavenly Jade Sea. The disparity between voluntarily giving up and leaving, and having left after being impeached by the elders was far too great. 260,000 years in the future, who within the 4 seas and 8 realms would dare to subject Dijun to such a grievance? Fengju was so angry that she cried on the spot. She sat dully for half a night, feeling angry while thinking that Dijun would definitely be very unhappy as well. Consequently, she went to the meal room before daybreak and remained there the whole day, intending to prepare a table full of exquisite cuisine to welcome Dijun's return, while comforting him at the same time. Fengju had just started double boiling the last dish, Buddha jumps over the wall, when a little immortal child came to the meal room to report that Dijun had returned, and was currently waiting for her in the bedchamber. As soon as she heard what was said, she immediately extinguished the fire and quickly ran towards the bedchamber. While she was on her way there, she remembered that she had stayed in the meal room all day, so her body was steeped with the smell of smoke from the kitchen fire. Hence, she hurried to the nearby side bedchamber to have a quick bath. Dijun had also just finished his bath and sat on the jade stool, allowing Fei Wei to clean and reapply medicine on his whip injury. It was a wound caused by the King Lei whip in High God Fu Ying's hand during his ultimate showdown with him. The King Lei whip was one of the top divine arms listed in the 8 realms weapons chart. Even with Dijun's innate ability to regenerate faster than ordinary people, an injury sustained from it would still take several months to heal. Just as Fei Wei retrieved the medicine for the wound, Dijun heard the sound of urgently rushing footsteps. The footsteps sounded hurried and chaotic as if it contained many endless pressing worries. He gathered his robe together as he turned to stand up. As expected, he saw the young maiden dressed in red standing at the entrance of the bedchamber gazing at him. "Come here." He raised his hand towards her. She had seen the wound that was now covered by the snow-white inner robe. Approaching him step by step, the rims of her eyes reddened as she asked softly, "How did you get injured?" The young maiden lowered her eyes, trying hard to hold back her tears, but could not restrain the redness at the corner of her eyes and brow. Her heart ached for him, and ached so badly that she needed to cry. She really understood him very well. He stroked her head, placating her, "Don't worry, it's not a serious injury." She continued looking down, biting her lip. "Turn around, let me have a look." Fei Wei glanced knowingly at them before putting down the medicinal ointment and retreating, going as far as helping the two of them close the chamber doors on his way out. As he did so, he inadvertently caught a glimpse inside the chamber and saw that Dijun had once again been settled back onto the jade stool. The young man's back was facing the chamber doors, blood from his unhealed open wound seeping slightly through the snow-white inner robe. The young maiden stood at the side, her expression unreadable. Her fair hands were on the ridge of his shoulder, intending to slide his robe off. Fei Wei did not dare look further and hurriedly left with light steps. The upper robe slid off his body, falling in a pile at his waist, revealing the young man's strong and beautiful bare back in the gentle fluorescence of the bright pearl. Along with his back, the vicious whip injury running from his left shoulder right across his entire back to the right side of his waist also became visible. Due to the slow healing injury, the rolls of raw fresh flesh could still be seen after debridement of the wound. Dijun did not feel that it was a serious injury, and besides, it was already halfway healed. Initially, he felt that since she was so insistent, letting her have a look wouldn't be a big deal. But as soon as he was disrobed, he heard a sharp intake of breath coming from behind him. That was when he knew that she was frightened by his injury, and instinctively started to put his robe back on. He spoke comfortingly once again, "Don't be afraid. It's already almost fully recovered, and not painful at all." But she stopped his hand from putting his clothes back on, her soft voice carrying a hint of hoarseness from a reined-in desire to cry, "The medicine hasn't been applied yet." He stopped. "Weren't you frightened by it?" "No," she said dully. She lifted the medicine bowl Fei Wei had left behind onto her hand and began applying medication to the wound. Inside the bowl was a jade spoon and applicator stick that were originally used to apply the medicinal ointment, but she worried that the jade instruments were too hard, causing pain to his wound. After weighing it up for a while, she abandoned the jade instruments and dipped her fingers into the ointment, then she very lightly and gently applied the ointment to his wound. His body tightened, and she worried if her fingers were hurting him. Her movements became even softer and gentler than before. As she was especially slow and gentle, it was a long time before she finished applying the medicinal ointment to the entire length of the wound. The wound was covered by the white ointment, appearing like a moist silk ribbon sliding down across his strong back. Although it was no longer unsightly, it must still be very painful. She thought, otherwise why would a layer of perspiration still seep out from his back even when she had obviously used such a light and slow movement while applying the medicine? It must have arisen because of the pain. With this in mind, she placed one hand onto his shoulder, and asked him in a soft doting voice, "Is it still painful?" Without waiting for him to answer, she spoke again, "I will give it a blow." As she said that, she leaned over slightly, placing her other hand onto his bare skin near the wound. Moving her lips closer, she lightly blew at the medicated wound. She felt his upright sitting body shiver slightly. "Does it still hurt?" Her heart ached for him, but she could not think of any other way to help him alleviate the pain. Her right hand that was placed on his back unconsciously caressed him downwards, her lips shifting towards the wound a little further down. "Then I will give it another blow." Just as her warm breath hit the wound on Dijun's back once again, her hand that was placed onto his left side was suddenly held. Before she could react, her arm was aggressively pulled at it. In the next moment, she was already half lying on Dijun's lap, and firmly taken into his embrace. The young maiden raised her head, blankly looking into the lowered eyes of the young man who was gazing deeply at her. When he forced her to face him directly with his right palm holding onto the back of her head, she finally reacted. When his body stiffened and shuddered earlier on, it really wasn't because of the pain. Her face that had resembled a fresh maple leaf flamed into a crimson red in an instant. I am not." She wanted to explain that she was really conscientiously applying the medicine onto his wound, and did not mean to seduce him. But before she could get her words out completely, he had already bent his head and kissed her. It was a very deep kiss. And they kissed for a very long time. He closed his eyes after he released her, his forehead pressed against hers. Her whole body was on fire and her mind was a befuddled mess under the effects of his kiss, yet she still remembered to defend herself. In a soft whisper, she said, "I did not want to." He smiled inconspicuously as his eyes remained closed, It's not you who wants it, it's me who wants it. His reply made her feel shy. She bit her lower lip lightly, then she raised her arms, placing them on his shoulder and looped her hands around his neck. But when her gaze landed on his jade-carved shoulders, she suddenly thought of his injury. She was startled for a while before responding to the fact that she should not let an injured person do anything strenuous, and immediately tried to get down from his body. Sensing her movements, he opened his eyes, and looked at her for an instant before suddenly standing up with her in a princess carry. She jumped in shock and instinctively embraced his neck. It was just a few steps. A few steps to the jade bed. It was already nightfall at the heavenly jade sea, and all was quiet. Although the bedchamber was illuminated by bright pearls, their magnificent brilliance were tempered by their half-closed clamshells, leaving only a faint and gentle glow. The low glow cloaked the bedchamber in a hazy layer of dusky color. The young maiden was placed in between a mass of soft cloud blankets. In the next moment, the young man leaned over and pressed his body on top of hers. Her face flamed blood-red as she immediately guessed what might happen next. Your injury. The young man's forehead pressed against hers. Amused by how adorable she was to still be concerned about his wound at such a time, he smiled. It's nothing. After that he caressed her lips, and kissed her once again amidst the hazy glimmer within the bed curtains. Bai Gun happily rushed to see his father lord after he heard of Di Jun's return, but was stopped by Fei Wei outside the bedchamber. Fei Wei honestly had no idea how he should explain to little Gun why he could not enter the bedchamber at this time, and not just at this moment, but perhaps the entire night. Just as he was racking his brains, he saw Gun with a contemplative expression. Father Lord is giving Juju remedial lessons again, right? Fei Wei stared blankly for a moment. Remedial lessons. Gun nodded. This kind of thing is a very common occurrence. There are many times when I come looking for Juju at night. Brother Zhonglin would say that Father Lord is giving remedial lessons to Juju to help her catch up with schoolwork, so I can't interrupt. He sighed with resignation. Juju's master is really strict. If she is unable to keep up with her schoolwork, she would definitely be heavily punished by her master. Father Lord helping her with remedial lessons is very important, I do understand that. Fei Wei did not know how he should reply to his words, so he could only nod his head mechanically. Yes, remedial lessons are very important. It's good that you understand, young master. Bai Gun gave an yes sound. Then I shall not disturb Father Lord and Juju from working hard. He left sensibly as he spoke. Fei Wei's state of mind was complex as he watched Gun's tiny figure disappear into the stone hallway. For a moment, he felt a slight ache in his conscience. The icy moon is full on the horizon. Tonight the full moon blesses the reunion of lovers. Tomorrow will be a good day. End of Chapter 8. The whole Pillow Extra has 9 chapters, just search around this channel for the other chapters audiobook. Thank you.